Long days and pleasant nights, fellow fans of the man who always lives up to his name. That's right, Mr. Stephen King. This is Jaime En Fuego. You are on the horror show. Bienvenidos, welcome. And this is my weekly Sunday segment that I so affectionately call Hail to Stephen King. And this is, that's like the 4th or 5th episode at this point, because I basically started this coverage out by doing a segment many months ago called Why You Should Read Stephen King. And that was almost like a test pilot for if, there was interest in me actually trying to cover my favorite author, as you can see by this beautiful bevy of books beside me here. Yes, I do adore alliteration. And it did decently well, but when I realized that there was going to be 7 approaching months to the July release of the Dark Tower film, well, being an enormous fan, I thought that that was perfect timing to go back through each of the books, and there's definitely going to have to be a bonus entry for the Win Through the Keyhole, but to do the original 7 books all leading up on the 19th of every month to the film's release at the end of July. And it just basically has sprouted after the first episode from that to me deciding, well, what if I did some Stephen King coverage of uncollected short stories? And what if, I did a 40th anniversary for Stephen King's The Shining and the Kubrick adaptation and the miniseries, and talked a little bit about Dr. Sleep. And so everything has really grown in the last couple of months for me to finally have an official show, which is going to be here every single Sunday on the Horror Show channel on YouTube. So www.youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. Yes, we got all old school. At least I didn't say the http:// Well, officially at this point I did. So yeah, guys, this is a show where every single week I'm gonna, as opposed to just trying to make it retrospective, King news, whatever it may be, I'm always going to have a theme to it. And so we've done 2 different incarnations of the Dark Tower so far, books 1 and 2, and you can look forward to, on March 19th, my coverage of the 3rd Dark Tower book, which is called The Wasteland, which might be my favorite of the series. But similar to when I did uncollected collaborations of Stephen King, this week is actually going to focus upon an idea that came to me when I saw that there were more and more fans actually commenting on this video. And guys, that means so much. Like, a grande gracias to all of you for checking out the segments and for actually having something to say, and more importantly, for having inquiries about Stephen King. Now, just to give a little bit of backstory, you see this enormous bookcase where there is one shelf that is not being displayed. I own and have read nearly every single Stephen King book in the last 7 years after realizing that the man was one of the prototypes of a shared universe in the modern age, where when I realized that so many different Stephen King books interlock and have different characters that come back and stuff like that, I took it upon myself to start at the very beginning with Carrie and go through every single book. I'd read a few scattered ones here and there, but I renewed the effort, and I'm very close to being done. I just finished Dr. Sleep, which was amazing, which I did for that aforementioned anniversary for The Shining, and then I'm about to start the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, and I'm currently, I just started Revival. I kind of figured maybe leapfrog, start on that, and then just read all the Bill Hodges stuff in its entirety, all 3. I've read most of Bizarre Bad Dreams because many of those were published beforehand, but I digress, my friends. I have decided that some of those questions would be really BA to answer, and maybe give my personal, well, it's not really an expert opinion, I wish that it was, but I would say an avid fan's opinion. And so for the very first question here on the Horror Show, for the ongoing Hail to Stephen King show, I am grabbing my silly cellular device right here, and we have a question from a Mr. Adam David. What's up, Adam? You actually commented on one of the earlier videos, and then you got into some more detail here. So, the question from Adam is, as a first-time King reader, what book would you recommend I start with? That is a killer question, Adam, and it's really funny because originally there was one book that immediately came to mind. It's in my top 3, and yet the more I gave it consideration and actually talked with a few fellow Stephen King aficionados, I started realizing that maybe that book was not the best course of action, because drum roll, which is actually going to be briefly stopped for a second as I grab here. Yes, indeed, I have to get past The Shining for this one, but the book that I think would be best for a initial reading, nope, it's not The Shining, it's actually Salem's Lot. Yes, Salem's Lot is the book that I personally think is the best to start your Stephen King reading experience with this, and I'm going to briefly explain as to why. Everybody knows that Stephen King started out with Carrie, right? Yes, Carrie was a troubled girl who had, a power which she didn't really understand the magnitude of, abusive mother, the very, very teasing, nasty bullying schoolmates and stuff like that. So it actually was the first bit of us realizing that King, with books like The Dead Zone and Firestarter and lots of later stuff, was going to go into telekinetic powers and certain aspects of psychic phenomenon. But the very cool thing about this book, which is not the original cover, this is the deluxe illustrated edition that was put out many years later. The cool thing about Salem's Lot is that Salem's Lot basically, it's the only vampire novel that King has ever written, and it was his second book. And so whereas Carrie is kind of short and, it's written in an interesting style of different, like doctor's notes, newspaper clippings, journal entries, stuff like that. Whereas Salem's Lot is a true novel proper. And so at the time that he was working on this, for release in October of 1975, Carrie's rights were either in the process of being purchased by Brian De Palma or were just about to be. And so he was on the road to stardom, and it's very cool because he was still teaching, classes. I'm not sure if it was at the collegiate or the high school level, but, King writes about teachers and writers so much because of his own experience. The one thing the man has constantly proclaimed is that write what you know. And he has often taken that approach, maybe sometimes to his detriment, even though I love the guy so very much. And so this book is essentially about a novelist named Ben Mears who returns to his old town of Jerusalem's Lot in Maine. Could you have guessed that? Yeah, probably, since it's Stevie K and, he is a Maine native, and I've never been to this wonderful state in all of its inherent creepiness and delicious seafood, but one day I will get there. However, he comes back to his hometown because he wants to write a novel about the Marsters House. And the Marsters House is basically where a crazy gangster, almost like a hitman of sorts, used to live, and you get the feeling as you go through the book, well, not the feeling, the evidence that there has been lots of bad stuff that happened in this house over generation after generation, regardless of who was living there. A constant King theme that reappears and is almost like very H.P. Lovecraft, and many others have been, focused upon it, and it's just basically principled psychic and a poltergeist phenomenon is the fact that negative energy basically settles in places, and it often continues to happen when people reside there because of the fact that it permeates and it grows and so on and so forth. And so Mears returns to this small town of his, and he starts talking with an old professor. There's a lady that he likes. He befriends a few people and so on. However, there is a new owner of this Marsters House, or at least a new, resident there. His name is Barlow, and he is never seen, but Straker, which is his caretaker slash, person looking after his house, financer. Then you hear lots of details about this guy. It's been a while since I've read this book, so I'm just kind of riffing on it, guys. So this is not like a full-on review of Salem's Lot. This is just me telling you why I think it is the best book for Stephen King stuff to start with. First and foremost, it is a novel proper. Secondly, as I was about to get to, it is a vampire story. Stephen King has never written another novel about vampires. Now, Dr. Sleep, some may argue, came kind of close, but they were like psychic vampires and sucking spiritual, psychic essences out of people. Different. This is vampires proper. When he was teaching that aforementioned class that I couldn't remember was a high school class or a collegiate class, he was talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula. And so lots of the beats from Bram Stoker's Dracula are actually inherent within this novel, and with the exception of the fact that Ben Mears, as he begins his quest to figure out what is going on in this small town and if there is any connection with the aforementioned residents in this house that he is so fascinated with that he went into as a kid and was scared the crap out of by, he befriends a kid named Mark Petrie, who is a big horror enthusiast, and then also a preacher who is, is, you know, just not, he has some dark spots to him, and, you know, he has a, like, not so much struggle of faith, but he's just not a perfect person, and that's Father Callahan. And if anybody knows my real last name, Jaime En Fuego, you may know why there is this connection and why I love Father Callahan so much. Yeah, I guess I just spelled it out for you guys, but nonetheless, it is a very cool story because of the fact that the characters are incredibly well developed. It's gory. It's not even so much of the times. It's incredibly timeless. And even better, it was adapted a few years after Carrie came out in 1979 to CBS by none other than Tobe Hooper, who did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive, and was very prolific and was doing his first television work at the time, adapting this book. Yes, that's right. He adapted it splendidly into a two-part miniseries for CBS. Barlow was straight up Nosferatu frightening. All the performances were good. It built itself well. I often say that the reason I loved King in the miniseries format is because his books are so long. Now, this one is originally only 400 pages, but the thing that I have to get to, that is another reason why this book is a good one to start with, is because if you want to explore the aforementioned extended universe of Stephen King that I love so much, there is the opportunity within this book. So basically, you can be a first-time reader, you can check this out, you can decide if you want to read more Stephen King and be happy with it and go on and do it, or you can enjoy the book because either way you're going to love it, and you can just toss it away and be done with it. So if you want to explore it further, first and foremost, there are, in this amazing and one of the first King books that I ever owned, Night Shift was a short story collection that he put out shortly thereafter his first few novels had been put out. I think this came out after The Shining, if I'm not mistaken, but lots of his short stories were scattered through various local and national publications, and so there is one that originally appeared in The Main, which is technically a sequel to this. It's called One for the Road. It was adapted into a short film that actually starred my dude Reggie Bannister from the Phantasm series, but that one is kind of a pseudo-sequel that explores what happens to the town of Jerusalem's Lot after Ben Mears and Petrie and Callahan and his crew of people actually go to war with this growing town of vampiric nastiness that starts to spread over the course of the amazing Salem Slot. And so there is also a bit which was written exclusively for Night Shift. One for the Road also being a sequel, Jerusalem's Lot is actually a prequel that King wrote specifically for the aforementioned Night Shift that actually also ties in with the kind of epilogue of sorts, One for the Road, and both of those short stories are collected here in this beautiful volume that I was showing to you earlier. Yep, sorry for the glare, guys. You know, when we're lighting stuff, it's a little bit difficult. So, once again, the reason that I think this is your best introduction, being Salem's Lot, to Stephen King, is that you can be one and done, you can enjoy it and just disregard it, or if you want to explore further, you can get to those two short stories. Jerusalem's Lot being so awesome as a prequel because it happens hundreds of years before somebody in the Marsters House. It's very H.P. Lovecraft about hearing there's rats in the walls, and it's about a man like slowly going crazy. Definitely seek that out. One of the best short story collections that I think King has ever done. You know, some people really enjoy Skeleton Crew, some people enjoy Nightmares and Dreamscapes or Everything's Eventual, but my two favorites are Night Shift and Just After Sunset. But that is for another video, and we can talk about that further then. But both of those tie-in stories are delightfully housed in this beautiful hardcover, which also has some deleted bits of manuscript, and it is a worthy purchase. But honestly, you can get away with just either getting a paperback or a delightful looking hardcover of the original Salem's Lot. And the even cooler thing is, if you want to explore further than even the prequel and the little epilogue slight sequel of bits, if you read The Dark Tower, you will be introduced once again to a particular character from this book. Now, I don't want to divulge who it is for the sheer fact that, well, it would be slightly spoilerific. However, if you love this novel, you will definitely love books 5 and 6 of The Dark Tower. Sorry, it's like tough to posture, you know, when you're holding these hefty hardcovers that Mr. King loves to write. So, yeah, if I could recommend any Stephen King novel that you guys could start out with, because of the fact that you can go either way. You can explore more, or it can just be something you enjoy and relish, especially if you're about vampires. He's really only done a couple other vampire-like stories. I mean, The Night Flyer was amazingly adapted into a, feature film that had Miguel Ferrer, rest in peace, incredible actor. That one is about vampires and a tabloid writer. And then there's also another short story called Popsy, which ironically not only is in the same Nightmares and Dreamscapes collection, but is also back-to-back with the aforementioned Night Flyer. So yeah, take it for what it is. Maybe the Little Sisters of Eluria from the Dark Tower side storying is also part of that vampiric canon, but nonetheless, King has only written one vampire novel. If you're into vampires, and remember, they were so huge for a while with all the Twilight BS and crap like that, if you want to read Stephen King writing a Bram Stoker's Dracula inspired story, this is your ticket, man. I cannot recommend it enough. And the original miniseries is fantastic, although I love Larry Cohen's The Stuff. I cannot recommend the Return to Salem's Lot, nor can I recommend the TNT Rob Lowe miniseries that was done. God, was it terrible. But the original one that Tobe Hooper did was great, and I did see it before I read this book. I say check them both out, because as far as a visual representation, I think it just got a deluxe edition on Blu-ray recently. Seek it out. It's awesome. The book is awesome. Read Stephen King, as I always like to say, guys. So I extend a grande gracias for anybody tuning in here this week for this installment of Hail to Stephen King. I want you to ask me questions about the King. I want you to impart your own insight, your own wisdom. But another person I have to extend the grande gracias to, of like the most ginormous magnitude, is Mr. Bev Vincent. Gracias, dude, for not only inspiring me with your book, The Road to the Dark Tower, which was released by Cemetery Dance, and I'm still trying to track down a copy of. I know they're all signed and out of print, and I've never read it because, as you can see, I've got Robin's book there from Ms. Firth, who is like Stephen King's official historian, but I want to read that particular thing in its awesome hardcover variety. There's paperbacks floating around, but as you can see from my hardcover collection, I'm a purist and a collector of the sort that is only just following on the trail of guys like you, Richard Chismar from Cemetery Dance. So if you guys are into Stephen King, please follow, check out everything that Cemetery Dance does, that Vincent does, and that Richard Chismar does. Those guys are awesome. I've been showing some love on the Twitter. Much appreciated, homies. And I'm very curious in a lot of ways what you guys think about not just Salem's Lot, but more importantly, just the Wheel of Ka that is Dark Tower as a whole. So perhaps in the near future, we can connect properly here on the horror show, and I can pick your brains a little bit, and we can discuss. And we can discuss all things King proper. In any event, I've been Jaime En Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, on my own channel, which is called Enfuegotainment, where I cover the hottest entertainment with an edge constantly. But more importantly, I spend the predominance of my time here on the horror show, at least 2, sometimes 3 episodes a day, guys. We are vigilant with all of our coverage. Be sure to check out my 40-year anniversary of Stephen King. We're going to have a link to that here in the description and in the after credits. Also to the 2nd edition of my Road to the Dark Tower movie, inspired by Mr. Bev Vincent. Shout out to you, man, once again, and lots of love. And also, guys, do not forget to comment every single week with a question of some sort or your thoughts on the show, because if you ask a question and I pick it for the following week, what you are going to get is none other than your very own Coexist shirt. That's right, here on the horror show, this is our exclusive design that you can get nowhere else, well, with the exception of our TeePublic site. But if I pick your question and I have it next week on Hail to Stephen King, we are going to be sending you your own shirt, and I thank you kindly. Thank you, Cy. And until the next installment of Hail to Stephen King, hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope we make it sooner rather than later, and until then, stay scared and read Stephen King seriously.